Hello, this is John Hart, and we'll go through another paper as an example of what you'll be asked to do for various papers. This one is on heart rate variability in people with spinal cord injury comparing to able-bodied persons. So heart rate variability is a test for nervous system function, autonomic nervous system in particular. So here's the purpose of the study. They call objectives or main goal. And you can best to put this in your own words. But if you use exact wording, again, use quotation marks before and after, and then in-text citation. So in-text citation would be Cero Ano et al., comma, 2015 in parentheses. So the methods, they used heart rate variability to gather the data, and that would be enough to cover this. You don't have to use all the words, even if in your own words. And they found significant, and we know that they're talking about statistical significance because we see p-values here. P stands for probability, that it happened by chance, and anything below 0.05, in general, 0.05 is the typical cutoff, so values below 0.05, like here, 0.01, means that it probably did not happen by chance, that there's something else going on besides chance. So they found statistically significant differences between paraplegic and able-bodied persons in regard to this heart rate variability value and these other values. And here's the conclusion in the abstract. So here's the main body of the paper. And we find the goal, the purpose, the goals, and the purpose here again. Toward the end of the introduction is where we usually find that, The main goal is here, secondary goal there. And participants, 42 paraplegic persons compared to 36 able-bodied persons is something you could include in your description of the sample. And measurements, data collection, they used this monitor. You could mention that. And they looked at resting heart rate, mean RR interval, SDNN, root mean square of successive differences. So you could mention that in data collection. When you're asked about analysis, usually there's a subheading. In this paper there is, in the other one there was not. So part of the analysis was they looked at average and SE, which is standard error, excuse me, and the 95% confidence interval. And they also did t-tests. So you could include that. They looked at averages, and t-tests would cover it. And the results, you'll be asked sometimes about differences between groups. In the AB group, able-bodied group, almost 70% were male, and in the paraplegic group, approximately 83% were male. So that's one difference between the groups. And also, continuing in results here, statistically significant differences in time domain, that's the SDNN and the RMS-SD for heart rate variability. So again, in results, overall, the paraplegic group, they had reduced variability compared to the able-bodied group. So reduced variability is not a good thing. Increased variability is better than reduced. And they also looked at this. You could include this. They looked at the level of injury above versus below T6, and they did not see a statistically significant difference. And P is greater than 0.05. That means it's not statistically significant. Here are some other differences between groups. In the paraplegic group, average age was 46.93, a little younger than the able-bodied. So that could be a slight factor when looking at heart rate variability. Younger people tend to have better heart rate variability than older people. And I don't think they mentioned that in the limitation down here, which are usually found in the discussion section. Limitations and disadvantages you'll be asked about when going through various papers. Other differences between groups, so the BMI looks to be very similar between groups, and it looks like the paraplegic group, interestingly, had higher practice in sports, so maybe more concerned about keeping the upper part of the body active since their lower part is inactive, maybe compensating. Time since injury, 16 years, and of course no spinal cord injury over here in the able body. And some other differences here. For example, mean heart rate, 69.5 in able body, and a little higher in paraplegic, 73.8. So lower is better for resting heart rate. RMSSD is a heart rate variability statistic I look at in my practice. And in the able body, 34, basically 35 for able body, and a little lower in paraplegic persons, 23. So that's 11. The unit is milliseconds, so about 11 milliseconds lower. So lower is worse when it comes to heart rate variability measures, at least these two time domain metrics in heart rate variability. And it looks like the SD, oh, that's something else. Here's the SDNN. That is statistically significant, as was another heart rate variability measure, the RMSSD. Here are some frequency domain measures in heart rate variability. I'm focusing on these, especially this one. I'm more familiar with this since I used it in my work. So discussion has limitations toward the end of the discussion, usually toward the end. And they're talking about other papers that included a small number of variables, and then they jump here and say another limitation. So apparently they're saying this is their inclusion of a larger number of variables apparently is they consider a limitation, a small number of variables to help reduce possibility of what's called a type 1 error, and that has to do with incorrectly picking one of the two hypotheses, the null versus the alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis would be that there's no difference between the A, B, and P groups. And the alternative would say that there is a statistically significant difference in the heart rate variability in this case. Here's another limitation. They talk about short-term recording, but it looks like they're saying it's still similar to 20, similar to other longer recordings. And then they come back and say, here's what the main problem is with short-term. So they did short-term recordings. I think it was, we can go back and see what, see how long they recorded. We can go back to the measurements here. So it looks like 15 minutes. So there's the limitations, and here's the limitations and conclusion. And that concludes our presentation here, and thank you for watching.